This is the big one. 1 p.m. Eastern, Miami Dolphins, undefeated, 2-0 on the road at the Buffalo Bills, 2-1, 1-0 at home. I was watching this line all day because it takes a long time and to properly prepare for the show. And I wish, and now when the buys come, we start the buys next week. That's going to be so advantageous for me because then I'll be able to finish in enough time to really sit with the work. And what ends up happening is I need to sit with the work when I'm live with you guys, which is not the way I would like it. But I was hoping this line wasn't going to move. I didn't want it to move, and it started moving too quickly. And it's come back a little bit. At 5:30 p.m. at Pinnacle, this moved from -2.5 at -117 to -2.5 at -128. So I immediately went to Bet365 and saw that the -120 was still there, and I was like, "Oh, I gotta bet it. I just have to bet it. I want the Bills here. I want the Bills on their field goal. I want them at home, and I don't mind spending a dime on it." And I could have got them earlier in the day at -115. I could have got them this morning at -110. So this it was my fault for waiting, and that's going to happen a lot with a Tuesday night show and wanting to talk all these games over with everybody, with you, Troy, and with everybody in the chat. Right now, it's at -123, so we've had 17 cents of movement to the Buffalo Bills. We talk about, when we have big favorites or teams with something, like the trip going to the UK after or then in the following week. We need, if you're going to bet a big favorite, there has to be motivation. And if you're going to expect the team to not be focused or thinking about a trip to London, where the Bills will be next week, it's the Dolphins coming to town. And the reason we were so heavy on the Chiefs was they had motivation. The reason why Oregon smacked Colorado, with that huge 21-point spread was because they had enormous amounts of motivation. The reason why I couldn't take Temple, even though I kind of liked them against Miami, was because Miami was on their first road game of the year. So Miami was going to have the motivation. It was a really easy sell as a coach to motivate. I'm not concerned about the UK trip. Took me a long time to get there, but that's basically what I'm saying. From a total scenario, we are sitting at a 54. That's where it opened, at 54. That's where it is right now. We have had an 8-cent move to the under. 8-cent move to the under. Here we go. Highmark Stadium, Orchard Park, New York, 74 Fahrenheit, sunny, 5 miles per hour. I will be able to hear the stadium from here, man. This is as big an early football game of the year that I can remember over there at Orchard Park. Let's take a look at the cash flow for this spot. We have 40% of the tickets and 72% of the cash on the Buffalo Bills. And from a total side of things, you have 84% of tickets and 82% of cash on the over. Miami comes in off that dominant 70-20 victory at home over the Broncos. Scored the most points in a game by an NFL team since 1966. Set a franchise record for scoring. Finished 2 points shy of the NFL regular season record. Of course, they could have got it if they wanted to. It was a smart move by McDaniels not kicking that field goal. Fourth team in NFL history to score at least 70 points in the regular season or playoff game. 726 yards of offense. 10.2 yards per play. 6 of 6 in the red zone. Everything I said there, I would like to fade that team the next week. This goes towards the same thing we were talking with player props. Tagovailoa, 23 of 26, 309 yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. He completed each of his first 17 pass attempts. Mike White even got into it, 2 for 2 with 67 yards and a touchdown. Miami scored touchdowns on 8 of 9 drives. Devon Achane was unbelievable. 3rd-round pick out of Texas A&M. I mean, how many speedsters does this team have? 18 carries for 203 yards, 2 touchdowns. Caught 4 passes for 30 yards, 2 touchdowns. Raheem Mostert ran 13 times for 82 yards, 4 touchdowns. Caught 7 passes for 60 yards, touchdown. Dolphins ran for 350 yards and 43 carries. Rushed for 5 touchdowns, 8.1 yards per carry. Tyreek Hill caught 9 passes for 157 yards and a touchdown. The defense was all over Russell Wilson. They only sacked him once, but they hit him 12 times. Held the Broncos to 3 of 12 on 3rd down, 1 of 4 in the red zone. Safety Javon Holland forced 2 fumbles. Emmanuel Ogbah had an interception. And Jalen Waddle missed the first game of his career in concussion protocol. Also, River Craycraft hurt his shoulder. Wide receiver in the second quarter was ruled out. The starting linebacker Jalen Phillips left just before halftime with an oblique injury. Phillips making his return. He missed the week 2 game because of a back injury. And then center Connor Williams left in the third quarter with a groin injury. Williams started every game since joining Miami last season. He wanted the extension in the offseason. They wouldn't give it to him. He thought about sitting out. And now Liam Eichenberg had to replace him, and Eli Apple is in concussion protocol. Those are a lot of issues, a surprising amount of issues for a team that just dominated 70-20. Bills come in off an extremely impressive 37-3 victory at Washington. They've outscored their opponents 75-13 since losing to the Jets in week 1. Josh Allen, 20-32 for 218 yards, touchdown and a pick, ran 3 times for 46 yards and a touchdown. The offensive line protected them all game. The Commanders did not sack Allen once in 32 passing attempts. Not once. That very, very dangerous front group did not sack him one time. Stephon Diggs caught 8 passes for 111 yards. James Cook, 15 carries for 98 yards, caught 2 passes for 14 yards. Now, there's still things to work on. Their red zone play has not been great. They were 2 of 4 in the red zone. Allen threw yet another pick. But the Bills' defense looked excellent. It was the first time since 1995 that a defense sacked the quarterback 9+ times and picked him off 4+ times. That's what the defense did last week. Now, you could say the same thing I just said about not believing in the Dolphins offense. You could say, well, why would you then think that this Bills defense would be able to follow that up? And no, they're not going to be able to follow it up. And neither is it. Maybe both will regress to the mean. And that's why we're going to have a real close game right around the 3 points. Terrell Bernard had 7 tackles, 2 sacks, a pick, and recovered a fumble. First NFL player with 2 or more sacks, an interception, and a fumble recovery since Urlacher in 2007. Epinesa, Tre'Davious White, Micah Hyde also had interceptions. Epinesa returned his to the house, held the Commanders to 0-2 in the red zone, 1-9 on third down, 0-1 on fourth down. Take it away here for us, Troy. This is my only bet that I've made before the show started. Everything else I like to add during the show or after the show and plan it during the show. I'm on the Bills -2.5.
This is one game. I mean, you look at this game, it's immediately the first game you want to look into. I mean, it's just the best game on the card, but you could pick your poison, man. It's about the toughest game you could imagine. And it's definitely a Bills or nothing spot, seeing how great the Dolphins have been and seeing my guy Jimmy the Bag on the Bills. I mean, that's enough for me to fade the Dolphins, or not fade the Dolphins, but stay away from backing the Dolphins at the very least. But I just have questions about these the strength of schedule for these guys so far. The Bills against the Jets, the Raiders, and the Commanders. Some good defenses mixed in there, and they've been impressive. They had the best third down conversion rate in the NFL right now. That's the Buffalo Bills, and that's versus the Jets, with the Jets and Commanders as 2 of their 3 games. It's 66% of their sample. I mean, that's pretty damn impressive. But there's just some things that I'm personally missing with these Bills and how their defense is. Because, yeah, sure, they locked down the Commanders, forced Helen to 4 interceptions, and look great in doing so. But the 3 out of the first 4 possessions, the Commanders marched right into the red zone. And that resulted in 2 picks and a 4-and-out on the goal line. So it didn't turn out well, but they still allowed the Commanders to drive down the field. And then the bottom kind of fell out, and they weren't able to repeat that to any degree. And the Jets were able to dominate a little bit in the run game on the Bills. And that kind of turned me off a little bit. And the same thing goes for when you look at the other side. When you start looking into the Dolphins of the sky. The fucking Dolphins. The Dolphins played the Chargers, the Broncos, the Patriots, and what they were able to do offensively versus the Chargers and the Broncos was impressive, but that wasn't really there against the Patriots. I just feel like the word's out, the judge's out, the jury's out on these 2 teams still. I still need to see more. I want to be on the Bills. It's just so hard to get there. And I sent you a false stat, Jimmy. I meant to apologize earlier. I sent you something about Josh Allen getting sacked at the highest rate in the NFL. It's vice versa. The Bills sack at the highest rate in the NFL on the lowest amount of attempts. So take that for what it is. But the Bills defense has been sacking the quarterback. They had played against some pretty shitty offensive lines in the Commanders and the Jets. Holy crap, this is a tough game. I think I would have moved on the Bills if it wasn't for these. And I should have prefaced this early in this conversation with all these games, because there's so many that apply. Divisional dogs. It doesn't have to be a home dog. Divisional dogs in general, and specifically the ones that land on 3. So home favorites in the division and they're favorites of 3 points. Since 2020 are 9-18 ATS. I mean, this is definitely 100% a Bills or nothing spot. I just can't get to a side in this game.
These totals at 54, I immediately want to bet the under. I wanted to bet the under in Vikings Chargers, and I couldn't do it. And when I was watching it, I was thankful in the second half that I wasn't on the under, although it cashed, which tells me that the first half under here cut out the late game hijinks. That's more than possible. We know the Bills are going to want long drives. Slow this game down. So the first half under has begun to appeal to me here.
Well, I have good news for you. Last year, totals that were over 52 were 2-9 to the under.
Yeah, I every time I see a 54, I want to try to get underneath it. I was just a little nervous in the last one. This one I think is probably perfect. It's probably a perfect spot to do it in. But I'm not sure if I move on this tonight. It's another thing when you have these games with an implied high volatility with the high total. It's nerve wracking pressing the button on the under. So that still exists. Big
I'm
Ragu.
making a note on that, Jimmy. I like the under in this game. I mean, this is just a complete change of competition for both teams. I think there's going to be a huge adjustment period. First half under sounds sexy.
Because if I told you that 21 points were scored in the last 5 minutes of this football game, would that surprise anybody? No. So I'd want to keep that out of it. Birdie says biggest factor for me is the Bills' defense is just not fast enough, especially in the secondary to hang with Miami speed. That's very valid and fair. Bigger Goose says Bills have dominated Orchard Park last 6 there. Also 8 out of the last 10 in this series. He says, Allen, don't fuck this up.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. Bills as short home favorites, very profitable. Very profitable team.
I'd like to keep the amount of action like I had last week. I thought that was right in my wheelhouse. I'd like to have about 10 bets, and so we'll see how much I have. But this first half under is becoming more and more appealing. So, and Jared TG says his Dolphins are nothing for him. So he says would probably rather just bet the under and enjoy watching the game. Jared TG, that's the fun. No one in the chat ever be uncomfortable being on the other side of either Troy or I and stating it publicly. That's part of the fun, and we don't ever take offense of any of that. All right. That is Dolphins Bills. I'm already on the Bills minus 2.5. We'll see if I expect to move on the first half under. I'm not sure if I'll do it tonight. And then we will see what Troy moves on. Let's move on.